A smile costs you nothing, but has a lot of value. The same can be said of kindness. Kindness can cost no time at all, but be remembered for the lifetime of someone else. An act of kindness can be any number of small things. A particular example is something that a lot of LGBT people suggest is straight people putting their gender orientation and pronouns in their Twitter bio. Something small to normalize something that has been niche until recently, socially at least. But there are people who take issue with normalizing something like that. And those people essentially take issue with the act of kindness towards another person. This video is kind of a weird thing. Just kind of a talking point of self-improvement for people like that. So if you're interested in learning a little about other people and their struggles, and if you're interested in possibly becoming a better person, then I'm just going to talk for a little bit, and you can just listen for a little bit. Oh boy. If you're not interested in becoming a better person, and you're happy the way you are, then you can go about your way and pay no mind. But the excuse that comes a lot of the time with people who take issue with acts of kindness is, it's almost always, well, my dad, well, when I was a kid, when I was growing up, my dad. It always seems to be the dad, which I think is another root thing here. But it's always, when I was a kid, my dad, hit me. My dad called me names. My dad did this. My friends did this, called me names, hit me, beat me up. I fought with my brother. I fought with other kids. I fought with whoever. The worst one I can think of right now is a couple days ago I saw a video of a kid's third birthday where he's about to blow out the candles on his cake, and then a family member comes over and dumps a bucket of eggs on his head. And then all the other family members start tearing apart his birthday cake and throwing the pieces at him. And just, assaulting him with food and things. And the kid is in tears, completely in shambles. Doesn't lift his head, just in shock from what's happening to him. And it's horrifying. It's terrible. It's awful. And people in the comments were being like, haha, that kid will learn never to trust the real world again, or that kid, realizes the real world ain't shit, or whatever. Or my family did this to me when I was a kid, and, this sense that because they were abused as kids, they grew up tougher, and so it should happen to other people. But as much as those people don't want to normalize something like kindness, they seem perfectly okay with normalizing abuse for the sake of false self-improvement. Because all that kind of abuse does is perpetuate and create abuse of its own in the same form. That's how child abuse happens, or even if it's not abuse, just any shitty tendency of a person always comes back to, well, that's how my parents did it. And the question is never, did I like that when I was a kid? It's always, well, I'm perfect the way I am now, so it must have been right. My parents couldn't have been wrong because they're just the superiors to me. And now I'm superior. And so my way is right. And it's weird. It's so bizarre, a culture, a society so against simple acts of kindness. This talking point kind of came up in my brain because today the creators of Family Guy announced that they would not be making any more gay jokes in their show. And the comments were full of the SJW strike again. You're all a bunch of pussies. Some of y'all parents raised bitches. All that kind of stuff, you know. Normal, average, clear-minded, stable people's responses to a show saying that they aren't going to mock a marginalized group anymore. And the problem here is twofold. First of all, anything can be funny. Anything can be made fun of in some way, shape, or form, but it's all about your context. It's all about delivery. And the problem with comedy is that comedy is the hardest form of entertainment to get right in a lot of ways, but it's the easiest to fuck up exponentially in a lot of ways. Because something that you think is funny can reveal a lot about your personality. If you think it's funny to throw a child's birthday cake at them, then you're kind of a shitty person. Like, whenever you do something that you think is funny, if the people around you are horrified at your actions, there's a little bit of a chance that you might be a crazy person. That you might just be a bad person. And badness of personality, you know, like, being a bad person is something that entirely hinges on whether or not you're self-aware enough to realize when you're being a bad person. For example, I got into an argument earlier about this whole Family Guy situation because while anything can be funny, and basically the situation is that the creators of this show, just like the creators of The Simpsons, in response, in you know, terms of removing Apu from the show, when they removed Apu from The Simpsons, a lot of people had the same responses as this thing about the gay jokes in Family Guy. But the whole thing with Apu is not that people wanted him removed from the show. They wanted him written better. And it's the same thing with any form of comedy, where you can make jokes about gay people. You can make jokes about black people. You can make jokes about anything. As long as the joke isn't, haha, look at this weird person, right? Look at this not normal thing, right? Like, comedy is about a lowering of class. This is something that Plinkett talked about in his Star Wars review. If you throw a pie in the face of a rich person, it's funny because it's a lowering of class. Oh, wait, no, it wasn't Plinkett. It was... what was his name? It was Jack in one of the Best of the Worst things. Comedy's a lowering of class. If you throw a pie in the face of a rich person, it's funny because you're lowering them down to the standards of the Three Stooges. Right? But if you have a homeless woman who's diseased and dying and sick, and you slap a pie in her face, it's not funny. It's sad and horrible. Because this person can't get any lower, right? And when you have something like, you know, like gay people who until recently would be murdered in the street for being openly gay, or black people who are still murdered in the street for being openly black, or, you know, all these videos every week of somebody in a department store getting screamed at because we don't want your kind in this country, go back to your country, even though they're from San Francisco. Like, these people who endure abuse daily, who, for some of them, their entire life is just societal abuse, it's not funny to make fun of them. It's really not. And that's, I'm not even considering that to be a matter of opinion. It's not funny to make fun of people whose lives are trash. Right? But you can make jokes around that, of course. Especially if you're within that marginalized group. And some people will call that a double standard, but you have... this is one of those things where it's hard to explain. Like, it's hard to quantify. But the people within that group of suffering, within that struggle, there's, what is the word? What's the term? It's bonding through adversity. It's unity through adversity. I don't remember, honestly. But, you know, people in a shitty situation grow closer because of it. And so some of the joking within those groups is about, like, man, this is fucked up, huh? Like, a lot of comedy, and a lot of my favorite kinds of comedy, involves laughing at an absurd situation. And that's good comedy. That's good writing, is making fun of an absurd situation. So, for example, I talk sometimes about, there was a Super Best Friends podcast where Liam made a joke about the 3/5 compromise. Now, the 3/5 compromise, because everyone, I would assume everybody knows, but some people don't know. The 3/5 compromise was a thing back in the day when black people first got their freedom, and they received the right to vote, but they, you know, black people, they aren't the same as a regular person. And so their vote only counted for 3/5 of a normal, quote, quote, person's vote. Normal being Caucasian. And that's kind of the thing where I talk about normalizing being gay openly, or normalizing putting your pronouns out there. Normalizing these things is good, because back in the day, being black wasn't normal. You weren't normal if you were an African American person in this country. Normal people got one vote. Black people got 3/5 of a vote. 3/5 of a vote. They counted for 3/5 of a person. Now, that is fucking insane. That's crazy person talk. Because first of all, how does that fraction even work? Mathematically, it's a crazy person's idea. Now, ethically and morally, it's also a crazy person's fucking idea. The idea that a person would count for less than a person. Right? And so that act itself is not funny. There's no way to make that funny. But what's funny is how absurd that situation is. So when you make a joke about the 3/5 compromise, you're joking about how funny it is that that actually happened and was a real thing. You're not making fun of, haha, black people are 3/5 of a person. You're not, that's not the joke. The joke is that the act was absurd. And when people make racist jokes, quote, quote, racist jokes, it's not funny if the joke is just like, haha, Mexicans drive lawnmowers. That's not funny. But a joke about, let's say, I mean, an easy one, where you take anything like, I'm looking at a Pikachu on my desk, where you say, somebody says, I don't really like Pikachu. And then you say, I don't have any problem with Pikachu, but I wouldn't let one date my daughter. And the joke is that there are people who would look at something that's different, somebody that's different, and be like, no, that one can't marry my offspring. Like, it's crazy. It's completely insane. And you can only laugh at how crazy it is, or get depressed. But laughter is the opposite reaction to, like, sadness and suffering. And so sometimes you kind of inverse. You kind of, like, you're just used to it by now. You're kind of numb to it. And all you can really do is laugh. But that's comedy. That's kind of our basis here, is that it's not funny to be shitty to people. It's funny to make fun of shitty situations, or to make fun of people who are shitty to other people. Right? Now, occasionally there are shock value jokes, where in context, like I said, anything can be funny. So something like after the Joker shooting occurred in the movie theater, all those years ago, whatever year that was, where there was a guy who went into a movie theater dressed up as the Joker and just shot the place up. And people died, and it was horrible, and it made people afraid to go into movie theaters. And to this day, whenever me and my girlfriend are watching movies, about halfway through the movie, consistently I'll glance at the door and just wonder what if. And then I spend part of the movie nervous about that. And so there's nothing funny about that situation. There's nothing funny about the act that occurred. But like 3 days later, Dane Cook was at a comedy club or something, and he made a joke where he said that The Dark Knight Rises was so long, like halfway through that movie somebody had to have been like, oh god, shoot me. and that's horrible, and a lot of people were really pissed off, and justifiably so. But my response was laughter at the time, and even now thinking about it, because it's absurd that you would go for that at that time, at that place, with people the way they are, and it's unexpected, and unexpected things are funny too. Comedy has to be unexpected, because it's not funny if you know the punchline halfway through the joke. I wouldn't have expected somebody to go for it that hard that soon, and that's what made me laugh. But the act is not funny. And so when you're talking about comedy or anything, it's you consider who's getting hurt by this. And the problem is that a lot of people don't consider who's being hurt by it. They don't care who's being hurt by it. A person I follow on Twitter, Julius Goat. I don't know their actual but they just talk about, they're kind of a political talk person, but not like, they talk more about the ethical kind of stuff, like societal kind of stuff a lot. And they make like rather depressing jokes at the expense of current events, and so I find it funny. But one of the things that they talked about is they went into a big long thread about what a modern society of fascists would look like, and how, if you're going to create such a society, how you would do so, right? And using historic examples from the 1940s, and vague comparison, not vague, but like subtle, wouldn't it be crazy if this were the case when this is the case, right? That kind of thing. And again, it comes down to fantastic writing. It was a Twitter thread that was the best novel I read last year. But in that thread, he talks about a society where people don't belong to each other anymore. And not in the sense of property, not in the sense of ownership, but a society where people do not feel like they owe other people anything, right? And now in life, you don't necessarily owe people things, right? You should always put yourself first, for the most part, like in things that matter, right? It's important a lot of the time to put yourself first and to make sure that you are happy and that you are secure and safe and satisfied with life. If you have a shitty job and it's not working out, it's not your obligation to stay there. By leaving, you may be hurting other people, like, fucking over other people in the process, because, let's say you've taken on a bunch of responsibility, and that you are kind of irreplaceable at that point. But if you're not happy, you owe it to yourself to put yourself above that job and those people who are treating you poorly, and to move on with your life, right? So it's not to say that you should always put others before yourself 100% of the time, black and white. Nothing in this world is black and white, except for Nazis are bad. But other than that, almost nothing in this world is black and white. And so in a society where people don't belong to each other, the examples he gives are, why does it matter to me if someone is sick if I'm well? Why does it matter if someone else is poor if I'm rich? Why do I care if they're hurt if I'm not? Right? That kind of thing. And that's the kind of society that we live in. And that's the kind of thing where anything like this comedy situation, this Family Guy situation, or, you know, just anything in general is the whole PC culture argument of PC culture being bad. When PC culture, quote, quote, is general kindness towards other people. All PC political correctness culture is saying, if I say something that upsets somebody, if I say something that makes somebody feel bad, and they say, hey, don't do that anymore, please, I say, oh, I'm sorry, and then I don't do it anymore. And for some reason, that concept, that idea of, like, respecting somebody else's wishes for peace, for, you know, general well-being, like respecting that desire for happiness is considered a bad thing for some reason, because it intrudes on our stupid cartoon. My stupid grown-up cartoon can't be funny unless it's making fun of gay people. My stupid grown-up cartoon can't be funny unless it's making fun of blacks. My favorite streamer can't be funny unless he says the N-word. That kind of thing. And they don't consider the other person's feelings. They don't consider who's being hurt by it, because why does it matter if they're upset if I'm laughing? And why don't they just get over it? Because it's funny. Why can't they see that it's funny? It's not hurting me. Why is it hurting them? That doesn't make any sense. Right? And these people never stop for a second to consider the perspective of another person. Something like the Confederate statues. This statue stands as a monument to a conqueror that murdered my people. And that's what it means to me. As the theoretical, like, example, I'm the descendant of a slave, and this is a statue of a slave owner. And then, you know, Joe Honky over here in the corner is like, well, I doesn't see nothing bad to me. That guy was my grandpappy, and he did good things for me and my family. Well, yeah, but he stamped out the lives of other families, and you don't see why that might upset somebody. And so you as a person can't like sympathize with another human being enough to say, well, if this upsets them, is my historical pride worth more than this person's general happiness in their life currently? Are the acts of a historical figure more important than the well-being or happiness of a person currently in modern day? And the answer is always no for those people. Because, you know, it's always been that way. And my parents respected that general. And so that's the right way to do it. And then you get mad when this person steps up and questions your way of life, even though you've never questioned your way of life. And that's the core of the problem, is a lack of self-awareness and a lack of consideration for other people, because why can't they just be happy like I am, right? So, to kind of regain focus, it's not taking things away from you. It's not an attempt to take away your identity. It's not an attempt to take away your sense of self or your sense of purpose or meaning. It's not to take away the things you enjoy. It's not about taking away from people. It's about kindness. It's about simple mutual respect for another human being beyond yourself. And if you're against the idea of general kindness towards another person, then you're a bad person. But again, you can stop being a bad person through self-awareness. But you have to take that step, and it's scary. It's scary to question yourself and to realize that you've done something bad, that you've done something wrong, that you've hurt somebody. It's scary to imagine that, because everyone has this idealized vision of themselves where, well, nowadays a lot of people have a anti-idealized version where everybody seems to hate themselves. But for these egotistical people who don't believe in kindness, they have an idealized version of themselves where they say, you know, I'm always right. Everything I've always done has always been right. I will always be right. And anybody who doesn't agree with me is wrong. And if their way of life intrudes on my way of life, then their way of life should bend or go away. Right? But it's scary, but it's a necessary step in evolving as a person. One example somebody posted in that Family Guy thread was, it was a picture from the intro of the Star Wars Family Guy thing, where it was a long time ago before the gays were all in your face about it. And they said, if you don't understand, if you can't see why this is funny, then you're part of the fucking problem with this country. And you're just trying to be upset. And my response to that was, my actual, reply was, a long time ago when gays were murdered for being open, or a long time ago when people were murdered for being openly gay, doesn't quite have the same ring to it. To which I got no response. But my follow-up response, and my response for this video would be, it just left my brain. What was it? I laughed at that when I was in middle school. But what happened was I grew up. Which, crazy, because a lot of people I know from middle school or high school didn't grow up. But I grew up. And I grew out of it. It's like people who listen to the same music all the time and never pick up anything new and talk about how all the new music is trash. This shit from the 80s that's terrible, this is the only good music, right? I laughed at this when I was in middle school, and it was the funniest thing in the world back then. And you know what? It's still the funniest thing in the world, because new things are scary, and I don't like new things. And I don't like questioning myself and whether or not it's still funny. I was right when I decided it was funny, right? But part of growing up, and what I mean by growing up, is part of that process is learning about, recognizing, and learning to respect other people and their struggle. I guess becoming more worldly, even though that would imply that I left the house at some point. And of course, you can all ridicule me for being a keyboard warrior behind a screen and all that, but pay for my fucking air ticket and we'll go. No, I'm too lazy. But, I don't know if I've talked about it in videos, but going through school, I might have known Jewish people, but just never known it. But I never knew anybody that was overtly Jewish, right? But when I started playing Pokken, I met Corgian and Kino, and I haven't met Mins, but I see Mins on Twitter, and a lot of Jewish people who are or Six is a Jewish person as well, who are aggressively Jewish. Corgian's always talking about his I exaggerate, I hyperbolize a little bit, but, you know, like, they talk about the holidays. They talk about, you know, what it's like being Jewish and Jewish things, and whenever there's some kind of tragedy involving white supremacists marching with flags, they mourn because their grandparents, you know, are the kids of people who were involved in one of the greatest tragedies of our species, of our history of ever, right? And that's a type of person that I never knew growing up, but that I learned about, you know, relatively recently in the past couple years. And now I have a better understanding of their struggle and what their lives are like and what their history is like, socially and otherwise. And now when I'm online doing my stupid, meaningless arguments with people who will never listen to a word I say, when I'm wasting my time screaming into the ether about, you know, at the people perpetuating hatred, I'm now fighting those battles alongside and for and with those people in mind. Because now their struggle is my struggle. And it's because, while the rest of the world might not live in a society that belongs to each other, I live in a little bubble where people do belong to each other. Where if my good friend Ian is suffering, I'm suffering. If Kino's sad, I'm sad. If Six is hurting, I'm hurting. And this is all good relationship advice as well. You should keep that in mind, because I know a lot of you fellows out there, probably not the ones listening to this video, because I would hope that my viewers are smarter than that, but I see so many trash relationships, and they're relationships where there's no self-awareness and there's no belonging to each other. There's no, you know, it's selfishness. It's raw selfishness. But that a relationship is a microcosm of the bigger picture of you with humanity. And there's a song that I reference all the time that I just told Silva about. It's The Humbling River from, I think it's Pussifer. It's one of Maynard James Keenan's bands. And I've heard I've heard allegations about Maynard recently that, and listening to him talk otherwise, I'm not like the biggest fan of Maynard as a person in general right now. I think that he's kind of grown into something that he would have hated in the 90s, but that's not really relevant to this discussion. But the point is, that's just to say that I'm referencing the art, but not necessarily the artist, because the artist might have lost some of their intention over time, right? But the song The Humbling River, I'll try to remember, is a discussion between a man, a conqueror, a king, and an angel. And the king says, I've conquered country, crown, and throne. They've done everything. They rule the world. They've taken the land. They've braved the winds, the cold, the fire. What is it? Brave the quakes, the winds, the fires. I've braved and beat them on my own, but I haven't crossed this river. And it's just he's questioning why I've done everything in life. I have everything. I'm the strongest. Why can't I cross this river? And an angel says to him, pay no mind to the battles you've won. It'll take a lot more than rage and muscle. Open your heart and hands, my son, and together you will cross the river. And the river is a visual and a concept that I like a lot. And the river is you know, the hurdles of mankind. The river is our passage from what we are to something better. And you can't cross the river unless you join hands with your brothers and sisters and everything in between. It'll take a lot more than rage and guns, a whole lot more than riches and muscle. The hands of the many must join as one, and together we'll cross the river. And that is a society where people belong to each other. That is a society dominated by kindness, by small acts of kindness that normalize normal individuals. Small acts of kindness that lead to a better society, a better culture. And we're so far from it now. And there's so many people who are kicking and fighting against the betterment of themselves. And it's because it is scary. And it's hard to admit when you've done something wrong, like I said. But at some point, I mean, you don't have to. And that's the depressing part. And that's why it's frustrating, is because I want to say that you have to accept that at some point. You have to become better than you are, but you don't have to become better than you are. It's a choice. But it's a choice that it seems like some people might not be capable of making because of their upbringing, because their parents raised them as their parents raised them, and their parents and their parents' parents and their grandparents' grandparents. And it all leads to this person that is incapable of introspection, incapable of self-awareness, incapable of accepting others' burdens and struggles upon themselves. And this is not to put myself up on a pedestal, because I do love to do that. Everyone knows I love to do that. I love to talk about how great I am, because I am a narcissistic person at my core. But that is one of those things that I've introspected and realized about myself that I've accepted, and it happens, and then I laugh at myself when it happens. And then I do my best to damage control, but it happens. And, you know, part of me making this video, making a positive video instead of a negative one, is that I'm trying to better myself. And I'm looking at myself in the mirror and accepting the bad things that I've done and said, and trying to move on from that. There's another well, I mean, it's a Tool song, but it's also just referencing a psychological concept. But 46 and 2 talks about I want to know what I've been hiding in my shadow. What is the word? What's the lyrics to that? I don't know, but that whole song is about the concept of the shadow, and the shadow is a psychological construct that is it's everything negative about yourself that you don't want to accept, that you want to ignore. It's this thing where you just tuck away all of the bad, and you just put it in a little box, and you say, I'm not going to look at the bad, because the bad makes me sad. That's the shadow. And the only way to become a whole self-actualized person, to become a good person, hopefully, I mean, the real you on the other end might be all those bad things that you put in that box, but the only way to move on is to open that box and to accept those things about yourself in order to move on, because you can't move on until you accept. And so that's what I'm trying to do, and that's part of this video, of this podcast with Flo running in the background. But part of it is me working through these things on my own, you know, and hoping that by working through these things on my own publicly, that maybe somebody else can gain some insight from it. I've been listening to a lot of Plague of Gripes videos where he starts talking about people and, you know, why people are the way they are. And it's so weird because it's just an art video, but he just goes off on these tangents about, like, life, you know, and it's been good for me a lot, actually. And I would suggest that you know, if you've listened this far, to go check out Plague of Gripes' videos, because he draws weird furry girls, but I mean, that can be part of the process too, is a lot of people don't like weird furry girls, and at some point it's better off if you just accept the weird furry girls. I mean, I used to be very averse to furries. I've talked in other streams about how I used to be like I was a really shitty person before in high school because I was angry and I was fighting the world, and I was fighting against people that were different than me, taking over something. And that's the point, is I don't know. And I feel like a lot of people don't know. Like, what is the goal? What are these people in your conspiracy theory about these people trying to take away things from you? What do they gain by breaking you down? A person they don't know, that they'll never know, that they don't care about. And it's this self-righteous, idealized version of yourself that is a perfect person. But you never stop to ask yourself, what is it affecting? Who is it hurting? But luckily, at some point, I did ask that question, and part of it was when I found Tool and those songs. The song was the Right in Two. It's a song about angels watching mankind fall apart, and something about that hit me really hard. And then I started diving in deeper, and I learned more and more. It led me to a bunch of concepts about transcendentalism and, self-reflection and all these different things, and learning about these different ways of living and different, belief systems and all sorts of things led me to where I am now. And instead of, I used to, one of my things was I hated people who wore like snapbacks. And I think it was just the result of everyone I knew that, like, it wasn't people who wear snapbacks are shitty people. It's all shitty people wear snapbacks. That was the line of thought. And so it was just like, if I see one of those hats, I don't fuck with that person, right? And now I wear those hats. Because, I don't know, they're cool, I guess. Like, what's the fucking matter, right? And I mean, I still have my weird things. But for the most part, I've gotten a lot better about accepting stuff. There's always going to be things that you're not interested in, things that you're not okay with, things that you're not personally interested in being involved with. And one of those examples, to go back to the weird furry girls, is I'm just not a furry. That's just not me. But that's okay. I got lots of friends who are furries, and when I see their likes and retweets, and I can see like sweat and stuff, I just don't click on that one. And I go, you know what? That's cool that they like that. I don't really like that. And I move on with my day. I was never, like, anti-furry. I just, like, for a while I didn't want to be around them so much. Like, they made me uncomfortable. And some of the stuff still does make me a little uncomfortable to a certain point. But, whatever. They're my friends. They're cool people. Sonic Fox is a cool guy. But, and that's part of why people hate him so much. Why people hate Sonic Fox so much, if you know who Sonic Fox is. I mean, if you're watching this, you probably do. He's a fighting game player. He's the greatest fighting game player in the world. He's like the second coming of Daigo. He's amazing. He's a living god of fighting games, and there's no debating that. And he's very openly gay. He's very openly black. He came out and he said, listen, I know some people might not like it, but I'm black. No. But yeah, he's a gay black furry, and he's a god. And the reason people hate him so much is because those people who hate normalizing things that aren't like them, they see a gay black furry who is unstoppable. Actually unstoppable. He's on stages at events because he is so godlike. He's so good at what he does, right? He has a platform, and that drives them crazy. Because, they hate gay people shouldn't shove it in my face. When I was at work today and I saw a fucking cereal box that has a Bible verse as the front of the cereal box. And I was just staring at it, and I was thinking to myself, of all these people who are like, well, these other people, who, it's okay if you're gay, but just don't shove it in my face. and you've got a cereal box with a Bible verse. It was Ezekiel 4:9, if anybody's interested in reading that shit. You can tell I don't think highly of Christians, and that's one of those things where, you know, I don't go out of my way to be like spiteful and vindictive towards Christians, but I have a bad history with them. And so even though I have a bad history and I really don't like those people, I'm still accepting, because it is a generalization, and it's not okay to generalize people. Because, for example, Shady Penguin, if you know Shady Penguin, the PokeTuber, Shady Penguin's one of my favorite human beings in the world. I think he's wonderful. I love Shady Penguin. And Shady Penguin is incredibly Christian. And while there are a lot of people in my life who, I saw one of them recently, one of the people who, you know, contributed to making several years of my life awful and unlivable, I ran into one of those people recently, and I hate that person. I hate that person in particular, but they are a Christian, but they're not Christians. Oh no, don't enter rest mode. You know. And that's why generalizing is bad. And in general, while I still don't really interact with those people because of my own personal traumas, I'm not going out of my way to make their lives worse. What was I even talking about? I got distracted thinking about that awful person. That awful woman. What was I talking? Oh, about, yeah, don't shove it in my face, and then cereal box, right? Don't shove the gay cereal box in my face. Got it. Fruit Loops should really do some kind of promotion. But anyway. Yeah. And that's, again, a complete lack of self-awareness. That is a complete lack of, like, as you're writing the fucking thing down, as your graphic artist is typing the text in to make the thing, you're just not thinking about what you're doing. And you're not thinking about your perspective of the world. Or you are thinking about it, you're thinking like, no, they shouldn't be pushing that. I should be pushing this, because this is right. And never for 1 second considering why other people are talking about that. Because, okay, here's another thing. Should probably try to wrap this up soon. I don't know how much space I have on my computer. But another thing is another shitty person in my life that I cut out recently, who I'm not going to go into too much detail, but if they see this, which they could, then you know who you are, and yeah, I'm going to talk shit. Again, this is going to be a positive video at the end. I'm going to try to wrap it up in a positive way, but I'm just talking about types of people right now. And, you know, if you are this type of person and you can relate to these things, then maybe think about that. But this person is one of those where, well, why do gay people have to have parades? You know, it's legal to be gay now. Why do they have to have parades? Why can't they just be normal like everybody else? No, it's because, like, you know, if I spent centuries, if I spent a long ass time where me and people like me were murdered for being the way we are and persecuted, and there was a point in time people have talked about where it's like, you remember that point in time where a lot of people in office considered AIDS to be a good disease because in their eyes it was killing the right people? If I were part of that group and the troubles were loosened up even a little bit, I think that's cause for celebration. and it's normalizing. You know, having a parade for gay people is normalizing gay people because they're right there and you're looking at them and you're saying, wow, they're gay. And you have to confront it. You have to confront it as a person. And you can decide whether you're okay with them being gay or not, but, you know, they're not trying to convince you of anything. They're just saying, hey, I'm gay, and I'm here. But people have this knee-jerk negative reaction to it where they just go like, well, I don't like that because that's not like me. And this book that I read says that that's the wrong way to do things. And then they lie and say they're okay with it, but why can't you just be quiet about it so that I can pretend it doesn't exist? And it's like, because it exists, and you have to just deal with it. It's not hurting anybody. It's not hurting you. It's not affecting your way of life. You have to just deal with it. That's all there is to it. And it's not up for you to say whether or not they express, their happiness. Because for some people, it's a big deal coming out. And for some people, it's a big deal, accepting that you're trans or whatever, It can be a big deal to people. And just because it isn't a big deal to you, it's like I'm talking to a fucking child. It's bizarre that you have to have this conversation with grown-ups. And if you're watching this as a self-betterment thing, I'm not trying to be mean to you. I'm not trying to be mean to anybody. Unless you're a shitty person and you don't want to become better. But if you're trying to become better, I'm not, attacking you. But I'm saying that these are things that you tell children. That somehow people my age get to this point in life and just don't get it. And I think it's because it's one of those things where I thought about it earlier where when you say, when Americans say, hey, what's up, or hey, how are you doing, or whatever, or hey, Tom, how the hell you doing, that kind of thing, that's not a question. That's a greeting. It's not a question. You're not expected to give any kind of response to that. And it's weird but it's just something that we hear our entire lives and we don't think about it. Like when I say bye to my mom or my brother, whenever we say we love each other, we say love you too bye, as one word, love you too bye as one word. And we say it even if we're first in the conversation, if we're not responding, we still say it. It'll be love you too bye, right? And it's because at least for me, I realized recently when I was a kid, I would hear love you too bye, and I'd be like, oh, love you too bye, that's the word you say when you're leaving somebody, that's your farewell. And the words themselves never individually registered to me, and so you say, hey, what's up, you say, hey, how you doing, and that's something that you say when you see somebody that but those individual words don't mean anything in that context. It's weird. And so, I lost the thread again. What was it? Things that when you're growing up, you don't think about the words. You don't think about what they mean themselves. You just think about it's a phrase that doesn't mean anything, or that you're not considering the full context of it. I don't know what I was talking about. I've completely lost it. But to try to wrap this up on a positive note, to try to keep it at an hour, and especially because I don't know how much space I have left on my computer, we'll try to wrap this up in a positive way. This is probably not something I'm going to do a lot. I don't know why I did it tonight. I was in the shower and I started thinking about it, and I started saying it to myself, and I was like, you know what? Why don't I just talk about it for a little while? Maybe it'll be worth something. But carry yourself with compassion for others. Carry yourself with kindness. And whenever you're thinking about how do I say this? How do I word this? Because I want it to be meaningful, because to me it'll take 5 minutes, but to you it could last a lifetime. Whenever you're in one of those situations, the if-then situations of, or the why does it matter situations, whenever you're in one of those, you have to learn to catch yourself at keywords, right? To catch yourself at key moments, at key thoughts. So when you're walking through a doorway and there's somebody behind you and you don't hold the door for them, just stop and think about how that felt for them. Think about how much better their day would have been if you had held that door for them. Maybe they're having a bad day And maybe all they needed was for you to hold that door, turn around, smile, and nod at them. And never say a word. All you had to do was hold the door, smile, and nod at them. And just think about how you made that person's day worse, potentially, right? And that's going to feel bad. But you'll be better for it, because you know what? Next time you walk through that door at that Wawa, you're going to turn around and look behind you to see if there's anybody there. And if there is, if there's a family that is halfway across the parking lot, you hold that door open for them. You smile and nod and be as humble about it as you physically can be. And there will be so much gratitude from that person, and that will make you feel good. Because it didn't take you any time. It didn't cost you anything. But you made that person's day better. By simple consideration. By simple kindness. And if enough people be a little bit kinder, maybe we can turn this ship around. We can't save the fucking bees. The sun's still gonna explode someday. But hey, maybe we can make everyone a little bit happier about it. I'm your bar Eradicate. I'm fucking tired, and I'm gonna go to bed. Thank you guys for listening. And let me know if you're a shitty person in the comments. Goodbye.